Creature level 1 upgrade. Alright, if you guys ended up watching the build videos of when I put Creature together, you'll know that I have plastic gears inside of the transmission. Well, it didn't take that long for those gears to strip, so I ended up getting metal idle and differential gears. The drive gear is already metal, so I didn't have to worry about that, but yes, these need to be upgraded, especially if I plan on going brushless one day. So let's get this started. So in order for me to do this, I really do need to take the transmission completely off the slash. So I'm going to start off with taking the rear bumper off. It's held in with 3 screws, 2 on that side and 1 on this side. Okay, that slides right off. Put that to the side. Now I have to remove the transmission box cover, which is held in with 2 screws, 1 top, 1 bottom. In order for me to reach both of them, I need to take off the rear right tire. And while I'm at it, I'm going to take off the left tire too. Okay, with the gear cover off, you can see that I do not have the pinion gear or the slipper clutch. I went ahead and I took the transmission apart before this to make sure that the plastic gears inside the transmission did strip. And sure enough, they did. So instead of putting the pinion gear and slipper clutch back on, I just put it in a bag because, well, I would have to take them off to go back into the transmission. So I'll show you how to put that on when I'm putting everything back together. So the next step is taking out the motor and unplugging it. Unplugging it is that easy, and to take it out I have to undo these 2 screws. Okay, with the motor out, I can now take off the rear shock tower, but in order for me to reach all 4 screws, I need to take off the rear body mount, which is also held in with 4 screws. So I'm going to remove these 4 and then these 4. 2 right there and 2 on the other side. Okay, so there's the rear body mount. And there is the rear shock tower. Now, in order for me to pull off the whole rear assembly, or at least all the A-arms and stuff, I need to take off these 2 pins that hold the rear A-arms to the transmission. Okay, now that that's unscrewed, go ahead and pull that out. Now this whole rear area can come off. And to take the transmission off the skid plate, I have to undo these 6 screws. And I finally got the transmission off. But I'm still not to the gear. So first step with this is taking off the top of the drive shafts, which each one is held to the differential gear with a grub screw. Now that the drive shafts are off, I need to undo these 6 screws. Okay, there's the last screw, and before I pull it apart, there is some electrical tape on the bottom I need to pull off. And now we can see exactly what happened to the gears inside. Pull this apart very gently, make sure nothing goes flying. Alright, and there it all is. The differential gear. It doesn't look too bad. Ooh, it's a little bit grounded down on the teeth right there. Not much, but that will affect performance, and I'm guessing that this gear is the one that's messed up. And sure, yeah. Teeth are gone on one side. Okay, that explains why it's not working at all. So, what I'm gonna do is use a lint-free coffee filters and wipe this all out, clean it up a little bit, and then switch out the gears. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and pull out the bearings from each side. Now I could go ahead and just change out the gears, but I have a better transmission case that I'm going to go ahead and use instead of this one. And I didn't have it before, but yeah, now it's available. And actually, you can see a whole bunch of plastic from the idle gear as well as the differential gear all throughout the transmission. Looks horrible. Okay, but anyways, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and pull out these bearings and put it in a better transmission box. Okay, 3 of the bearings are really easy to get out because you can just push them from the outside with the right size screwdriver. But one of these is a pain to get out because there's not a hole on the other side. And there's a couple ways you can do this. I prefer to use a small screwdriver and just gently pry it out. But other people have mentioned you can use the bar that goes in there, insert it, and then just move it back and forth until it pops out. That can be a bit of annoying. Or you can just use a method of incorporating both of those. And once you get it out, believe me, it is all downhill from there. Okay, here's the better transmission box. I'm going to go ahead and just pop the bearings in. 2 on one side and of course 2 on the other side. Okay, so I just used a simple toothpick, cleaned out all the teeth for the drive gear. So that's good to go. Next, I need to get the bearings out of the idle gear. Just go ahead and use a screwdriver and push on the opposing side. As for the differential gear, I need to go ahead and take these 4 screws out and take out all the gears that are inside. Okay, with that off. In order to get this out, all I have to do is push on this part and it'll come out the other end. Inside there should be 6 gears and 5 bars. So there's 2 of the bars right there and everything else inside. I need to take all these gears out, wipe them down, clean them up with some WD-40, make sure they're bone dry, and then I'll go ahead and rebuild the new differential. Now that I have all these gears and bars cleaned, it's time to go ahead and open these up. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with the idle gear. And as you can see, it is made out of metal, unlike the old plastic one. When I compare the two, you can see just how badly damaged this thing is. I mean, that's pretty bad. So yeah, I'm going to be throwing that away, set that to the side. As for the differential gear, the whole thing doesn't need to be metal, just the outside ring. And when I compare it to the old one, you can see that the plastic ring is a bit worn down. Not too much, but believe me, that does make a difference. Now the one I bought includes the cap, the screws, which are the Millennium ones, and some instructions, which I really don't need. And if you want to, you can buy the ones that include all the gears inside. But since I already had those gears, I really didn't need an extra set. So it's time to go ahead and build this differential gear. Alright, so the first step is putting in the planet shafts, which are these 4 bars, and they go into these 4 holes. Those support the planet gears. There are 4 of those as well. Make sure those slide all the way down to the bottom. After those are in, I can work on the sun gear. Now, you can see there's a small hole in there, and that is where the sun gear alignment shaft goes. So go ahead and put that in there. And this slides in through that hole. Now before I seal all this up, I need to go ahead and put some differential grease in there. And this is where things get messy, and I really strongly suggest you use gloves for this. You don't want to get any of this stuff on you. And yeah, just smother it in there. You don't want to fill the whole chamber up, just enough for the gears to be very well covered. Okay, now that the grease is in there, I'm going to get the other sun gear, put that onto that sun gear alignment pin, get the lid, and you can see that there is a notch on each side of this differential gear, and there's 2 notches on this. So I'm going to line that up, push that down, wipe off all the spare grease, put in those 4 screws, and we are done with the gear. Alright, with the screws in, I can move on to the idle gear. And this is much easier because all I have to do is slide a bearing into each side, and that's it. Now it's time to go ahead and put all the transmission back together. So I go ahead and I start off with the right side, but before I do, I need to go ahead and get the drive gear, and a Teflon washer goes on each side. Then the long shaft goes through that hole, just like that. Next, we get this goofy looking bar that slides into right there. Then a Teflon washer goes on, and then followed by your idle gear. Almost there. The last Teflon washer goes on the other side of the idle gear, and then finally the differential gear goes on there. We're done. Now the Slash finally has all metal gears. But before I seal it all up, there is one thing that I need to add, and that is white lithium grease. So what I do is just hold it in one hand and I apply the grease to the gear itself while rotating it. You want a nice light even coat across all the metal gears. And yes, this is highly advised you do this. Once you get enough on there, you're good to go. Get to the other side of the transmission, put it together, and now I can go ahead and redo all 6 of the screws. Now, of all the screws, the shortest one is going to go right there. Alright, and the last step for the transmission is putting electrical tape across the bottom hole where you can see the differential gear. And now it's time to go ahead and reattach this to the slash. I'm going to start off by putting on the top of the drive shafts. Now that the drive shafts are on, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the slipper clutch. So the first step is putting this pin into that small hole on the drive shaft. Once that is in, I'm going to get the bottom of the slipper clutch, sorry about that. Then I'm going to get the slipper clutch pad. Make sure those holes or those nooks are lined up with those pegs. That way it doesn't slide around. Then get the spur gear, slide that on. Put on the spring, followed by the nut. And then I'm going to tighten that as far as I can go. Once I can't tighten it anymore by hand, I'm going to put the drive shaft forward. Tighten it all the way down. You don't want to leave it all the way collapsed, otherwise it defeats the purpose of having a slipper clutch. But once it's all the way down, unscrew it 1/2 turn. You can do more or less depending on your driving style. But yes, that's pretty much it. Now it's time to go ahead and reattach this to the skid plate. Transmission's back onto the skid plate. Now I'm going to take this whole rear piece, put it back to where it belongs, line up the drive shafts, slide them back into place, and then reattach the A-arms to the transmission using those pins. Now, I'm going to go ahead and screw down the rear shock tower using those 4 screws and reattach the rear body mount. Now, I can reattach the motor using those 2 screws and then put the pinion gear back on. Then the next step would be to realign the pinion gear with the spur gear with a proper spacing and tightening down the motor the rest of the way. Then it's time to go ahead and plug the motor back into the ESC, reattach the transmission box cover, put on the tires as well as the rear bumper, and I'm done. And finally, the Slash now has metal gears in the transmission. It was a long process, but boy does it feel good to have it done. And that was Creature's level 1 upgrade.